kiss to the Pope. My town was small, and nothing ever happened there. It was called San Fermín de las Rosas in honor of a saint who had lived there many years ago. He built a large church on our land, which was the pride of the old women who were always praying, surrounded by rose bushes that gave the town its name. This field full of flowers was, for us, the best playground imaginable. A central square where the church was located served as the heart of the town. The mayor's office, pharmacy, and bakery were its main establishments. 6 streets of houses squeezed together on each side of the church were all that existed. Surrounding the square were small green hills that made the area very beautiful. For me, every day was pretty much the same, but it was not boring. I would go to school, come home to eat, stop by the bakery to say hi to Dad, and then spend the rest of the day playing ball with my friends and thinking of some mischief to get into. Every day was similar to the one before, except for those dreaded Sundays. Whether the day was so splendid that it invited us to run through the fields or so ugly that it wasn't worth getting out of bed, my mother dragged me up with an unbearable, "Come on, Miguel, come on." I put on my best clothes and together with my 2 brothers and my parents headed, like the rest of the town, towards the church. That Sunday was special. While standing next to my mother in the 3rd pew, I struggled with the knot of my tie that felt like it was choking me and shifted my feet in my uncomfortable shoes. The priest appeared, and he looked especially excited that day. I guessed he was about to announce something important. At that moment, I didn't fully understand the relevance of what he was going to announce. But when he finally spoke, the whole church was in awe, and the old women in the front row began fanning themselves more enthusiastically than ever. Apparently, the Pope was coming to our town in a month. I thought the Pope's son must be someone very important for everyone to act this way. Even my mother didn't object when, minutes later, I left that incense-filled place to run around the church with my friends. The fact that I didn't understand the importance of the Pope's upcoming visit didn't prevent me from realizing that something big was happening in my town. The preparations to celebrate the arrival of that important gentleman began that very day, and what was most notable was that soon people from other towns began arriving to help with the organization. The person who grabbed our attention the most as kids was Carmen, the cousin of our neighbor Merche, who arrived for a visit. Merche was a 78-year-old neighbor who didn't remember much about her relative, but still welcomed her with open arms. Carmen herself was nothing special. The one who fascinated my friends and me was her son, Juanete. The man seemed to be around my dad's age, about 40, but my mother said he had the mentality of a 5-year-old child. We loved to watch Juanete. His mother dressed him as if he were a giant child, with pants that reached his knees, making him look even squarer. He always wore a checkered shirt tucked into his shorts and stockings that stuck out awkwardly above his shoes. He walked, swaying, shoulders hunched, with a trickle of drool always threatening to fall down his chin. He spoke very little, and when he did, it was to stammer to his mother that he was cold or hungry. He always stayed close behind her, and she was the only one he addressed. We liked to chase him and throw stones at him, although his mother would always scare us off. She would touch her son's head and constantly repeat that the Pope was going to cure him. From the first time I heard her say that, while we were eating in the town's big restaurant, I became convinced that the man we were waiting for was actually a magician. For the rest of the days, we spent time with my friends discussing what that great man would be like, what powers he would have, apart from curing Carmen's silly son, how he would be dressed, and whether he had a magic wand. That pastime competed with chasing Juanete, throwing stones at him and making faces at him. One day, our perception of that man changed. We had been in the park for a while. He was sitting on a bench next to his mother, who was knitting with great concentration while chatting with other elderly women from the church. My friends and I were looking for pebbles to throw at Juanete's neck. We made bets to see who could hit him the most times and kept track of the points. The poor fool endured our blows until at one point my friend Carlitos overdid it and picked up a stone that was too big. I didn't think he realized what he had done until the stone hit the back of Juanete's head, and then he turned to give us a deep, murderous look. From that day on, we did not bother him again. The big event finally arrived. In the central square of our town, in front of the important church, a large number of people gathered. The crowd ranged from mothers with babies in their arms to elderly people with canes or in wheelchairs. We ran between people's legs, evading the security officers who ensured that the crowd remained orderly and that the pathway formed for the Pope's procession was respected until we reached the platform from which he would give his speech. The big disappointment came when we saw the Pope for the first time. He was nothing like the wizards we had seen in cartoons. He wasn't wearing a tall, colorful hat, but rather a plain, ill-fitting white headpiece that had no magical aura. In our disappointment, we turned our attention back to Juanete, who was supposed to be cured and become normal that day. The man stood in the front row, accompanied by his mother, to not miss the opportunity. That man was a mystery to us. He often looked very silly, always dragging his feet and drooling, but we couldn't forget the hateful look he gave us when he got tired of us throwing rocks at him. We were eager to see what Juanete would be like once he became normal. One thing that caught our attention was seeing how people kissed the short, chubby man's ring. It seemed that all of the Pope's powers resided in this ring. Little by little, the man, wrapped in his tunic and white cape, advanced through the crowd. After hugging babies, blessing hundreds of people, and letting everyone in his path kiss his ring, the moment of truth arrived. The mighty Pope stood in front of Juanete, who was finally going to become an ordinary person. As soon as the Pope stood in front of Juanete and his mother, she pushed her son closer to the magical man. Without hesitation, the poor fool lunged at the holy man's hand and began to cover it in drool from all his kisses. People looked away. The image was a bit unpleasant, and it showed why that man was so special. The Pope did not push him away. Instead, he took his head and kissed it as Juanete continued to suck on his hand. After a few seconds, the Pope finally pulled away from the man and continued on his way, offering kisses and blessings. The man finished greeting everyone and gave a very boring speech, which we hardly noticed because we started running among the people. When the man left, the atmosphere of the town changed completely. We went from absolute seriousness to the craziest party. Beer and wine were passed from hand to hand, and we filled up on food, stealing slices of pizza from the stands that had been set up to sell to the locals. After a while, those who had come to see the Pope began to leave. Through tears, Merche said goodbye to her beloved cousin, since they had met again, and she was very sorry to say goodbye to Carmen. While the women embraced, we noticed Juanete fidgeting alone in a corner of the bar. Apparently, the Pope's magic had failed to transform him. Although we children were the only ones who knew the truth, we saw that at the moment when the Pope stopped in front of Juanete and he covered his hands with drool, the fool took the opportunity to exchange the holy man's solid gold ring for another one that he had taken out of his pocket. We were at the bar, and the foreign guests were about to leave. When Juanete realized we were looking at him, he took the gold ring out of his pocket, and after looking at it, he gave us the scariest look we had ever seen. Seconds later, he put the jewel away and turned into the same fool as always. That is the most vivid memory I have of the Pope's visit.